good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're located. Welcome to our Optimizing Business Central webinar for partners. My name is Elizabeth Morse, and I am the partner marketing lead on our team over here at Cavallo. I have a few housekeeping items to cover before we get started, but you can expect about a 50 or so minute presentation today, followed by plenty of time for Q&A. Feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar using that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our very best to get to all of them during the webinar. If we unfortunately are not able to get to all of them, we will definitely make sure we follow up with you. We are recording today, so you'll be able to view the recording within about 24 hours or so from our YouTube channel as well as our event page on our website. We're very excited to have Matt Grierbill, Senior Director of Solutions and Engineering, as well as Sam Klooster, Global Head of Partner Ecosystems, with us today. We're going to walk you through 6 use cases that will help your distribution clients 10x their efficiency while protecting every dollar of margin. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Matt and Sam to introduce themselves and get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I'll kick things off. As Elizabeth mentioned, my name is Matt Grierbill. I'm the Senior Director of Go-to-Market Engineering and Sales. I've been with Cavallo for about 8 years now. But prior to that, I was with a small manufacturing company in the motorcycle aftermarket for about 14 years. And my current hobby, I like to collect hobbies, but my current hobby is making pizza. And my real dream is to have a food truck by the beach. And when I sell out of food, I'm done for the day. I go to the beach. So pass it to you, Sam.
Thanks, Matt. Sam Kloster here, Global Head of Partner Ecosystems. It's great to meet everybody. A few fun facts for myself. First real job, I used to design flight controls for missiles and airplanes at Lockheed Martin. If you've ever met me in person, I'm much taller at 6'7", and I have 4 daughters between the ages of 9 and 15, which keeps me extremely busy. So today we're going to give you an overview of Cavallo and how we help our customers in Business Central. I'll provide you with an overview of our partner program, and then we'll dive into 6 use cases of how SalesPad for BC is solving challenges for distributors. Finally, we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. Cavallo exists to make our customers' businesses immensely more profitable, competitive, and valuable. This really guides everything we do in supporting our partners and our customers today. And this why, it really goes back over 25 years to when our founder was running his own distribution company. Pete was running the successful business. He was working too hard though, and he didn't know why orders were making or losing money. He was on Great Plains, and Great Plains is a great ERP, but it wasn't designed for the specific needs of his business, the distribution business. He needed something to really help him streamline his operations, drastically cut down on manual work, and tighten his margins. He actually had a crazy goal. He wanted to 10x his profits and work half the time, and he knew where he needed to focus. He knew that every order had a story, and in order to reach this goal, he needed to take complete control of the profit levers inside each order and have complete visibility into the path and data trail for every transaction. And that's where SalesPad was born. Since then, we've been a force in the GP world for over 2 decades. We've helped 20,000 users across 1,000 distributors to create $1 million in value, $100 million in value. And that's really driven a 92% retention rate and a 95% NPS score. So you know how distribution companies have really tight margins with the typical distributor making just 5 cents of profit for every dollar spent? Well, this is because they're not able to achieve the perfect order every single time. They're losing margin through pricing errors, inaccurate inventory picking, and too many administrative clicks in Business Central, just to name a few. SalesPad for BC was designed specifically to give order level visibility where they're losing margin and automate business processes to ensure it doesn't happen again. Mission Control is really the workflow engine, providing no-code automation and real-time visibility to streamline the entire order process. Profit Scan provides automated margin protection, acting as a filter to detect price leaks or cost fluctuations the moment they occur. And Customer IQ uses AI to identify at-risk accounts, allowing teams to proactively prevent this churn. Our ideal customer profile is really a small to medium distribution company or light manufacturer. Think of anybody who picks, packs, ships, stocks any physical goods. Typically, we're in the 5 to $250 million range or larger. A few billion-dollar customers use us, but really our sweet spot is in the 20 to 50 million revenue. Ideally, we're working with owners or leaders who are really profit focused, like our founder, Pete. And any US speaking companies across North America. We do have some Latin America and UK customers. We're making a big push into EMEA and LATAM later this year. On the partner side, we have a three-tiered partner program to reward partners like you on either a referral or a reseller basis. Gold partners receive 30% margin and typically has received nearly 350,000 in margin over 5 years. Silver partners, 20% margin, while bronze receives 10% margin. Whether you're a referral or a reseller partner, Cavallo's team helps you all the way through the sales process, from discovery to quoting, implementation, and support. And now over to you, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. So I'm going to get into some specific use cases, and we'll spend a lot of time in a demo environment inside of Business Central. But I want to frame things up a little bit first and really kind of reinforce the why and why this is so important. And so I'll start with a couple quotes here. So 20 to 30% of operational expenditure is lost each year to rework, miscommunication, repetitive tasks, fragmented systems, friction, and misaligned processes. Across all industries, this amounts to trillions in unrealized value. And so we exist to help distributors recognize that unrealized value by making their process more efficient, looking at manual, redundant, high touch point processes, trying to streamline that as much as possible. In 2025, the single biggest source of lost profit in mid-sized and enterprise companies isn't competition, innovation, or even market conditions. It's inefficiency. And so that's really our why, is to make them, more profitable, competitive, valuable. And so on comes mission control. So mission control is really kind of the central component of our SalesPad for BC offering. And so when we think about mission control is really intended to replace those high touch manual tasks with automated margin protected workflows that accelerate your cash flow, as well as help to recapture that lost profit. And we'll look at 6 examples today, exactly how we help you do that. But before we do that, I just want to acknowledge kind of how we exist with Business Central. So Business Central is really the foundation. It's a fantastic modern ERP. It accomplishes just about everything for its customers, no matter what vertical you're in. And so it's a very solid foundation. We like to think of mission control as the edge. So it's going to give you that extra performance that you're after, reducing those touch points, getting you more throughput, helping you to scale without having to necessarily increase headcount. And so we exist directly on top of Business Central. All of the execution that you'll see today is done in the native Business Central screens. Our logic engine is the only thing that's outside that you would actually set up the rules and conditions that we'll see kind of in action today. So when I think of when I'm talking about workflow and kind of where that inefficiency exists, SalesPad for BC really focuses on sort of that order management space. So from the time the order gets into Business Central to the time it hits the WMS, or if you're doing, pick, pack, ship natively in Business Central, it's that space in between from when you get the order to the time you actually pick, pack, and ship it. All the complexity that occurs in that space. So think about back order management. You don't have stock. What do you do? How do you keep visibility of those back orders and immediately identify when the stock's available to get those pushed through the system? Drop ships, how are we, reducing the effort to, generate those drop ships and make sure that the vendor's shipping on your behalf in a timely fashion without additional administrative overhead. Reservations, this is a big one for us. So thinking about reservations and how do we prioritize those reservations so the right stock is available for the right customer at the right time. Validations and approvals, this is kind of a big bucket of different things it could be. We've had customers that have large orders. We'll take a look at that today as an example, where they wanted to flag a large order defined by exceeding a certain dollar threshold because in those cases, they want to make sure that there's additional oversight. Larger orders are more complex. There's more opportunity to make a mistake on the pricing, and so they wanted to make sure that they're giving the additional oversight in those cases. So, how do we flag those orders, raise the visibility, and have a clear escalation path for that, so it's not creating a bottleneck in your operations? So, we'll talk a little bit about that. We won't have a payment example today, but we will talk a little bit about automated document generation. So thinking about once it hits the WMS, or if you're going to pick, pack, and ship it yourself, how do we get those documents ready so you're not opening up every single order and generating those manually, which can be a time-consuming task. And so, like I said, we just want to frame this up. This is the field of play we're talking about. Once the order's in Business Central, to the time it gets to that WMS phase where it's doing the pick, pack, ship, everything in between there. That's really where we're focused on creating that efficiency and giving you those profit dollars back. So let's jump in to our first use case here, and this is drop ship orders. And the problem statement here, and I just want to acknowledge, I know Business Central in their latest release is coming out with a button they're adding to the sales document, which is great. I'll still show how we handle it. It's really a no-touch way to generate your purchase orders. But the problem statement, of course, is the inefficient way in which you have to navigate out currently to the requisition worksheets, manually select the demand, generate the purchase orders rather than just having it kind of automate by virtue of the fact that that sales line is tagged as a drop ship. And so when we think about measuring the success of, fixing that and making that more streamlined, we think about things like the cost to process. A lot of this aligns with, recaptured labor that would negatively impact like net margin as an example. And so with our mission control, which we'll see here in just a moment, I can set up a workflow that looks at orders that are coming into that inbound state, identify the line item as drop ship, auto generate the purchase order, and also move it into a queue so I can have visibility of all the orders I'm waiting on my drop ship vendors to ship on my behalf. So I also get that key visibility component. And so with that, I'm gonna flip back and forth as I frame these different use cases. I'll flip back and forth to the Business Central environment. So I'm going to shift over there now and kind of show you what that looks like kind of in action. And so I'm starting off here in Business Central, and as I mentioned, all of the execution happens inside Business Central, and that's by design. We don't want users having to toggle between two applications and get confused where they're doing what. It's all in Business Central. All the execution happens, and the idea is for a lot of this to just happen on the back end. So there's not a lot of thought and decision that's happening on the front end by your active users. It's all just kind of being orchestrated on the back end. So I want to start just by showing the Mission Control dashboard because I think the visibility layer is critical. And so this is our sales monitor. And the sales monitor is giving you a visual representation of all the orders as they progress through all the different stages in your process. And so as you can see here, I've got a order here, and I've expanded out all of the queues that exist in that process. And so I have a new order entry state. I have an order queue for missing reservations. I have a back order tracking queue. I've got a drop ship queue. And so as those sales documents progress through this process, I can see exactly how many orders are in each one of those queues. So I know I've got 4 that are missing reservations. I know I've got 4 that are on back order. I can see the dollar value, the margin in this case. I can see the total sales value of that. And so I get a lot of insights. And if I want to drill into any of these queues at any given time, I can go ahead and take a look at the specific documents that are in that queue. So these are the 4 specific sales orders that I have that are currently on back order. So I have total visibility of that. I can also edit these queues. And so as a sales rep, as an example, maybe I just want to look at things that I care about. So I just want to know if my orders are missing reservations because that might create a bottleneck in delivery to the end customer. Or I want to track the drop ship order that I generated for my customer and make sure that that's progressing. Or maybe I'm in management and there's an approval I have to give for discounting. So I'm going to look at the discount approval queue to make sure that anything gets routed to me, I can see it immediately and take action on it. So I wanted to start with the visibility layer before we get into the use cases, just to show that as I show the execution and step these orders through the process, you would have total visibility of this flow with this dashboard. So those orders would progress through and you'd see that happening in real time. But let me jump back here and I'm going to grab a customer record and we're going to generate a sales document for a dropship item. And I'll show you how that routes in. And so I'm just going to quickly add a line item here. We'll do this 1900S. This is out of stock. I'm going to drop ship it, so I'm not going to do the reservations. And I'm just going to tag the line item with the correct purchasing code for drop ship. So we're going to drop ship this item. So I've got the order kind of queued up, ready to go. One thing I want to point out is you can see that I have this workflow queue on the sales document header. That's something that we add into the Business Central environment. So that gives you the context of where it's at in the workflow. So right now it's in my entry state. So it's in a new order state. I also point out this submit button here. And so this is our action, the Cavallo action to submit into workflow that I've promoted to my main menu of actions, so I can go ahead and submit it through. And throughout the demo today, I'm going to submit the document by manually clicking it so that you can see in real time sort of what happens. But keep in mind that part of our workflow engine also includes automated movements. And so if I wanted to set a rule that looks at the new order queue, it automatically moves things forward. Of course, contingent on them meeting all the conditional criteria I've set, I can set up those automated actions as well. So I don't want you to walk away thinking that you have to submit these manually. I'm just doing that to show you on demand the exact action that's occurring in the back end. But we can always do this automatically. So I've got this in the new order state. There's a drop ship line. I'm going to go ahead and submit this order. And on the back end, what will happen is the workflow will look at that order and say, you know what, that's a drop ship line item. Let's go ahead and route that into the drop ship queue. And when we move it into the drop ship queue, let's also generate a purchase order for it. And so we can see here that if we look at our workflow queue, not that the workflow is run, that's exactly what happened. It's now in the drop ship queue. There's also an audit, so we can see exactly what happened. And so if we look at our activity log, just as an example, you can see that the workflow action did move it. It moved it into the drop ship and it ran an action to actually generate the purchase order. And so there's our purchase order document right there, generated automatically on the back end. If we scroll down, you can see the ship to is the customer address, as would be the case in a drop ship scenario. And so just to kind of back up again, I didn't really do anything other than submit, and I didn't even really have to do that because we have automated actions that can push this through for you. But when that happened, the drop ship was flagged, moved it to the queue, so I've got visibility of it, and the PO was generated. So really, really hands off, eliminating a lot of clicks and a lot of administrative overhead to process those. So I'm going to toggle back and get back to a good starting point here. And then I'm going to jump back into my deck just for a moment and kind of tee up the next use case. So jump back here. Okay. So that was the drop ship. And like I said, the bottom line value is really, recovered labor, the administrative reduction in that overhead required to do that function, and it all ties into net margin. So it's really driving that profitability for you. I want to jump into back order management now and talk a little bit about this. So when we think about back orders, we don't have the stock available for a sales order. What happens next? Do we want to auto-generate a purchase order? How do we know when the stock's arrived? How do we match that up to the back order to make sure that that's pushing through as quickly as possible so that we're not delaying the customer even more? And also from a business perspective and a cash flow perspective, how are we ensuring that we're converting the inventory that comes into cash as quickly as we can? If it sits on the dock stock idle and I have a sales order that's back ordered and I'm not making that connection, that's a reduction in my cash flow and in my efficiency in converting that to revenue. So it's just my cash is being tied up on inventory that's actually sold, and enormously frustrating for distributors. And so this function that we've worked out with our workflow is really designed to address that. And what we'll see in just a moment is a scenario where I have a back order, and then I'm going to mimic what happens when a receipt comes in, and then it's going to automatically recognize that I do have stock now and move it through to the pick, pack, and ship stage for me. So I'm not actually manually going in, running reports, opening up that sales document, looking at the line, seeing can I move this forward or not. It's just automatically recognizing that on a loop and saying, yep, it's ready, move it through. And you can set conditional logic as well to prioritize that. So maybe you want to look at, requested ship date and use that as a condition in the reservation and the movement of the document. You can do all of that kind of on an automatic basis. And so when we think about measuring success with this scenario, I think about things like days of sales inventory. So that cash flow metric, how quickly are we converting our inventory into revenue? And then also cost to serve. If I don't have to run a report, look at lines, make this connection manually, it's just on an automatic loop doing this for me. I can really get that time back in my day. So really not only profitability, but cash flow in this scenario. So with that, I'll jump back into Business Central here now that we've got that a little bit framed up, and we'll take a look at a back order scenario. So I'm going to use that same item. Except this time, I'm not going to set it as a special order or rather a drop ship. I'm just going to release it through and it's going to recognize I don't have any stock and I need to do something about that. And so I'll put that same item on here, 1900S. And so I'm going to move this through. I'm just going to hit submit again. Production environment, we could automatically move those through if you don't want to hit submit. But this is going to recognize that I don't have stock. And so in this case, you can see it moved it into a back order state. And so as we saw before with the dashboard, I'll see that document in my back order queue waiting for inventory to be available. And so we'll go ahead and see what happens when we get some inventory in. So this would be sitting in this back order queue in a production environment, and we would have an automated workflow rule looking at this queue and saying, does the available stock meet or exceed the available line or the line quantity? If yes, move it through, create the reservation, move it to pick, pack, ship, generate the shipping documents for me. So just imagine a rules kind of looking at that back order queue now. And I'm going to mimic a receipt. So I'm going to go into my items here just for a moment. And I'm going to grab that 1900S. And we'll adjust this quantity on hand at my main location to kind of resemble what happens when you get an inbound receipt from a vendor. So I have 1,000 in stock at that main location now. So I'm back on my order. It's in back order state. I'm going to mimic what that automated rule would do by hitting submit again. And so now that I have stock, it's going to allow it to exit that back order queue because I have material available. And so we'll see this. In my case, my next step is pick package, and so we'll see that move through in just a moment. And so you can see it's now in pick package. And if we go down to my line item, we can see sometimes I have to refresh that. The reservation was made, and it'll push it through to that pick package stage. So move that over so you can see the reservation occurred there. The other thing I want to point out, and this is another use case, and I'll kind of jump ahead and just talk about this use case while we're here. When it hit pick package, it also generated my open pick and my open shipment. So those two documents, that's an action that we can do with our workflow. And so this not only moved it, made the reservation, moved it into pick package. Now I got visibility, hey, that's going outbound, but it also automatically generated those documents. I didn't have to go into that sales order and click around and generate any of those documents. It did it for me. So with that, I'm going to jump back out and we'll look at a couple other use cases. And the next ones are really focusing on reservations. And we'll wrap up with a couple examples of that and then a sort of a validation scenario. So we saw the back order. Let's jump ahead here to inventory reservations. And there's two flavors of reservations that we'll talk about today. The first one is what I kind of consider a simpler scenario where we can use our workflow engine to really get around the FIFO reservation policy inside of Business Central. And so where that becomes problematic is, let's say yesterday we received an order, that's not due for 2 months, and it took the reservation, and it's out there now. And then today we receive an order for that same item. And it's due tomorrow, but now all the stock's kind of tied up in that reservation that's not due for a couple months. What do we do in that scenario? Do we go into that other order on reserve, move the reservation around so we have the stock, available? Playing that game of kind of shifting things around becomes necessary to make sure that you're actually getting the orders out. Otherwise, you could, might lose a sale, if you don't have that visibility of it. And so we want to kind of get around that, and avoid those lost sales or the administrative work to shuffle the stock around when we see those sort of scenarios play out. And so when we think about the measuring success, of course, cost to serve, we can reduce the overhead labor to, manage those reservations. But I'd also argue that, there could be some lost sales that you're recovering if you had a false stock out because reservations were tied up on another order. And so that's something that we're gonna look at as well. But let's jump back and just talk a little bit about that simpler scenario first, and then we'll go into a little bit more of a advanced reservation scenario after that. So I'm going to go into my customers again. I'll use the same customer here, and I'm going to put let's do a new document, and I'm going to artificially move the requested delivery date out a little bit on this. So let's just grab this first item here, Athens desk. So I'll throw that on there. And let's say that this is actually not due until June 30th. And so it's a little ways out. And so I'm going to submit this to my workflow. And this workflow rule that's going to trigger here is really focused on this date. What I've effectively done in the back end is I've created a time fence around my sales orders that blocks reservations if they're not within that time fence. And the reason I'm doing that in this scenario is to account for what I just previously described. Maybe I don't want to reserve stock because it's not due for 6 weeks. I want to keep that stock available for the onesie twosie orders that might be coming in the meantime. And I know I've got another PO outstanding, so maybe I want to just kind of block that from reservations. So based off of that requested delivery date, when I submit this, I have a future order hold queue because I don't want to lose visibility of it. And I also want my workflow actively looking at the date as it gets closer to the timing. And so you can see here that the future order hold, that's the queue it landed in my workflow. And again, I'd have visibility of that happening in that great dashboard we saw previously. And if I look down here below, let me refresh. Sometimes that doesn't pull that off right away, but it'll pull the reservation off so that it's not, tied up on that order. And so we can see there's the reserved quantity was taken off that document. So when you set that time fence in this case, it moved it into this queue, so I have visibility. Hey, it's not due for a while. Don't lose visibility of it. Keep your eyes on it, and more importantly, keep workflow looking at it and actively monitoring it. But in the meantime, let's not reserve inventory. I don't want tying up any inventory. I want that available for orders that have earlier ship dates. So now, if we wanted to change the date on that, and as time progresses and moves forward, what we would do in a production environment is we would actually have a workflow rule looking at that. And as this comes within the time fence, it would automatically move it back out, make the reservation, and then push that through the normal process that you have. And so that's kind of the idea there is, creating that time fence to prevent reservations from applying if it's not due for a certain time period. And I will say this, this isn't the only way that you can solve for this problem. I'm strictly just looking at requested delivery date. You may have other conditions that apply that you want to evaluate to determine when reservations should happen. This is by no means a packaged solution that says this is how you have to approach this. This is just one way our workflow engine is utilized. It has been utilized to manage this scenario. But I'll show you the no-code solution on the back end and how easy it is to make these these changes before we wrap at the end of the session. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the advanced reservations scenario. So I'm going to get out of Business Central and we'll frame that up briefly and then talk about that one. Um, so this came up. We actually had a client now that reached out to us with a big problem. They were selling to buying groups, and the buying groups represented, you know, uh, half a dozen clients, very big strategic accounts. And those buying groups had requirements that this particular customer keep a certain number of items available for a certain period of time in certain quantities so that when they do place orders, they're guaranteed to have fulfillment on them. They're mission critical items for those buying group customers. And so what they were struggling with was how do you create kind of a future hold on inventory for a set of customers without having an order yet. The real orders haven't arrived yet, but we need to hold this inventory and sort of flag it for this specific customer group. So how do we do that? And so with our workflow engine, we had 90% of it, the solution already built. It just took some tweaking to create the connection between the group and this concept of a future hold order to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And so what we've developed is effectively a way to create a future reservation that will hold inventory on sort of a dummy future order. And as the actual orders come in for customers belonging to that group, it will draw down the reservation and apply it to the actual order as those orders come in. So you're effectively creating this future reservation for this group and then allowing them to take from it as the actual orders come in. Meanwhile, the other orders, the onesie twosie orders come in from different customers, they can still take down from the available stock, and that reservation is going to remain intact so that you're guaranteeing those items and those quantities are available on that, over that specified period of time. So let's take a look at that scenario, and I'm just going to get back to a good starting point here. And let me just jump back here. There we go. All right, and I'm going to switch my screen. Okay, so to start this off, I'm going to jump into the future hold order and show you what that looks like. And so I'm going to go to my sales monitor, and I have a actually rather reservation hold, not future hold. So this is my reservation hold queue. So any of the orders that are kind of future holds for inventory that I want to make available for customers to a buying group or something of that nature, they're going to go into this reservation hold queue. And so if I want to look at this order here, you can see I've got this sales order and I've got a couple items on it that I've decided I want to hold. Those are the quantities, and you can see I am in fact already starting to draw down on one of those items in particular. So I've received some orders from this buying group for that particular item, and I've drawn down from 150. I've got 44 left that I initially held for them. One thing I want to point out here is the customer name here. And so what I've done is I've created a customer name called buying group A. So that's just a generic thing that says this is my buying group, right? But if you have specific buying groups or a channel sales or a specific customer even, I'll show you why that matters in just a second. But I've got this set up for a buying group. Now, as I mentioned, the workflow was 90% of the way there. We just had to kind of make some tweaks. And I'll show you kind of what we tweaked and what we made available now in our production build so you get access to this with standard mission control. There's something called reservation reassignment policies. And so this is where we make the connection between the customer or the group they belong to and the reservation hold order, so that when the customer places an order, it knows, hey, there's a reservation hold order that matches that customer group. Draw it down from this order. And so you can create a number of different reservation reassignment policies here. And so this just happens to be my reassignment policy for buying group A. And so what I'm doing with my customer match filter is this allows you to build out any number of fields at the customer level that need to be true for this to qualify for a reassignment policy. So in my case, I've simply used the customer priority field and any customer that's tagged with buying group in the priority field. I know that's probably nothing close to what you do in a production environment. That just happens to be the field I'm using. But you can add filters, any number of filters on here that look at the customer master record fields and say, hey, if they have these attributes, they're part of this policy. So once we've identified how we identify the customers, now we define how we identify the sales order, that future order that they can draw from. And so now we're setting the sales order filters. And so in this case, I'm looking for any sales order that has a sell to customer name of buying group A, but this could be any number of combination of fields on that order that says, hey, this has to be true, and then this is a reservation hold that they can draw from. So this was that additional 10% we had to add sort of to that environment to really kind of give it the additional, functionality to be able to accomplish this. And we'll see exactly what this looks like in real time in just a second. I'm going to jump back here and we'll go into a customer that's tagged with that buying group. And so if I look at the account for RelCloud, we can see that the customer priority field is tagged buying group. So this customer would qualify for that reassignment policy. So if they place an order for that 1906S, they're guaranteed inventory based on that future reservation I've made for customers that roll up to that group. And so if I were to create a new document here, new sales order, and it was the 1906S. So I'm just going to add the 1906S item. And we had 44, if you recall, remaining on that future hold. So I'm just going to add this item, and we'll increase this quantity to 10. So we should have 34 left once this goes through. So again, I'll submit. And in this case, I have a queue designed to reassign the inventory. And so we're going to see this go into a reassignment queue. And so that's exactly what it did. And you could have it auto forward out of that too and go right into pick package because, we're guaranteed the inventory, probably want it to go right into pick package. But I want it to pause there intentionally just so you can kind of see what happened there. So it hit inventory reassignment. And again, I'll refresh. Sometimes these reserve quantities don't update right away. But we'll go into that document and we can see that the 10 reserved there. And so I'll jump back into my dashboard and go into that future hold or a reservation hold order. So here's my reservation hold queue. We'll go back into that order that was reserved for any customer that rolls up to that group. And if we look at the 1906S, we can see that the quantity went from 44 down to 34. So it took the reservation from that hold. Again, that hold is intended to guarantee that stock for that specific customer for that specific period of time. And so that's kind of how that works. You can create these future hold orders, guarantee stock for those key strategic customers. So let me jump back and we'll cover one last use case, and then I think we've got some things that we want to wrap up with here. But let me jump back here. So we talked about future holds and advanced reservations. I want to talk a little bit about validations and approvals, and this is kind of a broad bucket. As I mentioned, this could be anything that you need to validate on a document, whether it's checking for margins, checking for over discounting. We've had customers where they wanted to flag orders if there was a $0 line item because nothing should be $0 unless it's a sample, and if it's a sample, they wanted management to have oversight to ensure the correct sample item was selected. So we've encountered any number of scenarios here. The one that we'll look at today is a pretty simple large order. This was a specific customer that had orders. They wanted to flag anything that was over a certain dollar threshold because those are typically more complex, require more visibility, require more scrutiny to make sure they're accurate, make sure we're not over discounting because a lot could go wrong with these larger orders. And so protecting those margins, making sure they're priced effectively. So this can really have a positive impact on gross margin. And this is all just our workflow engine, looking at conditions in the back end and saying, hey, this applies. Let's get visibility. Let's trigger a notification. Let's move it into this queue, make sure that we have approval on it before it moves forward. And so I'm going to back up here and go into just a customer again, show another order generation. In this case, I'm just going to adjust the price. And let me actually move my screen over here so we can see this. And there we go. So what I'm going to do here is, again, just create an order. I've got my customer pulled up. Here's my new sales document. And we're going to go ahead and add a line item. And I'm just going to manually update this price so that I can trigger my rule. And so we'll just make this 26,000. So it should flag it. So I've got something that's in excess of the rule I have defined. I'll go ahead and submit that. And when it submits, you can see that it did flag it for a large order. Go ahead and submit that on through. And this is going to go into my large order hold queue. And if I want to trigger a notification to somebody that needs to look at this and approve it, we can trigger, email notifications on the back end very easily with that. With that, that was the last use case. I do want to just talk briefly about the workflow on the back end. So everything is executed in Business Central as we saw, but the sort of the engine and the logic is all set up in our application, and this is what that application looks like. And so the queues that you saw the documents go through, those are defined by you or by your customer's business, whatever their needs are. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. You can define exactly what their flow should be. Once you have those queues defined, it's really a no-code interface that allows you to, set the actions. So what action should be triggered? What's the primary path? So in a perfect world, where should this go next? But in a real world, what are the alternate paths that the order could go through? So just as an example of that, if we were to look at my future order queue, in this scenario, where I had that reservation that I took off, moved it into my future hold because the requested delivery date was out a couple months. All I did was set a condition that looked at a field from the order. In this case, requested delivery date. I said is after a number of days from now, 5 days, move it into future hold and execute this action to remove the reservation. So very simple to set up. And these are just drop downs where you can pick any field from the customer, the order, the line, dimensions, and then depending on what object you select, this is just going to open up all the fields that are available for you. We have operating characters to make comparisons. In this case, I'm saying is after a number of days and then setting a static value for that. But you can really see just how simple that is to set up. And I referred quite often to automated actions. This is an example. I have it disabled right now, but this is an automated action that's looking at the backorder queue and saying, hey, if the quantity available is more than or equal to the line quantity, let's move that out of the back order queue, which would then trigger the reservation, trigger the pick document. And we can set these automations to run periodically. So this one runs every 15 minutes. So you can run it periodically. You could also run it on a scheduled basis. So if you have a specific day of the week you want to run it on, particular time, I have this disabled because I left it on and it actually cleared my back order queue for me during demos because I would receive a inventory in and then I'd have a half hour of downtime between the next demo and it would actually work and run and clear my back order and all my data, is pushing through. I want my back orders to talk about back orders. So I actually disabled it. So it definitely works. It definitely moves them through. And so that's an example of that automated action that I was referring to. But yeah, you would typically have your admin in this environment setting it up, and then you're just executing with your standard, Business Central users on a day-to-day basis, like we saw there. So with that, that was all the use cases we wanted to go through. Again, we're very focused on from the time you get the order into Business Central to the time it's that WMS, all that complexity in between with back orders, reservations, drop ships, validations, all of those things that those real distributors out there that are facing those challenges, the complexity. That's really what we're trying to tackle to reduce the administrative overhead burden, make sure that we're doing the exception handling to really protect those razor thin profits, and that's really what we're all about. So Elizabeth, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to wrap up with, or Sam. I can
Yeah, yeah, for
pause for a
sure.
moment here.
If you don't mind going to that Q&A slide on the deck, but we do have a question as far as timing goes for implementing this. Can you speak a little bit to that, just so a
Yeah,
partner
let's
can
get us
help
back here.
level set with their customer on timing?
There we go.
Awesome. Did you hear the question, Matt?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I think my headset went out. Go ahead. What was the question?
No worries. So someone asked about implementation, so the timing of it. Can you speak to that and kind of what they should communicate with their customer?
Yeah, I think the no code really helps us out. And I've seen these go pretty quickly, but I'd say anywhere from 3 to 4 months tops. It's kind of in that range.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And then curious on the licensing. How does it work between Business Central and
Mhm.
SalesPad for BC?
Yeah, so mission control, everything we saw there is a site-based license. So it's one mission control license per instance, so unique instance of Business Central. And so there's no user license, so anybody that's operating in the environment would have those rules. You could set those rules to govern their transactions.
Okay. Awesome. And then how does this work? How does this work with something like Power Automate?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I always view them as kind of very complementary. So we have a webhook action. I talked about actions that our workflow can trigger, and so one of those actions can be a webhook that can call something like Power Automate. So if you need to trigger an action into some other application that's in the Microsoft ecosystem or any of the connected apps you have with Power Automate, we work in a very complementary fashion with that tool.
Very good. Well, that looks like it's going to conclude all of our questions. Um, let's see. Actually, we got one more, Matt.
Mhm.
So, what would be a good rebuttal reply to support the reservations implementation? So, reservations sometimes are seen as negative and system blocks by consultants and clients.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see that. So I come from a procurement background, material management, and I always look at reservations as helping me understand an available quantity, which is a good starting point from a planning perspective. And so I always like the concept of allocations and reservations because from a procurement perspective, I want to know what I need to plan on once I've satisfied the current demand. And so I like it from that perspective. That said, unless you have a good mechanism to manage them effectively, they can be cumbersome and create bottlenecks, which is some of what we're hearing. But yeah, it's a great question, fair question. But I err on the side of wanting to know, from a planning perspective, what I need to account for, given if all my demand were supplied, all my sales demand. So.
Very good. It looks like that's gonna get all of our questions here. So thank you, Sam and Matt, for your time. Most importantly, thank you to all of you for joining us. We hope this was valuable. We hope to see you at future webinars. So I encourage you to visit our events page on our website. You can be found at cavallo.com/event. You'll be able to register for upcoming webinars as well as view recordings from past events. If you'd like to discuss what you saw today in more detail, Sam is your guy. So reach out directly to Sam. You see his contact detail here on this slide, sam.klooster@cavallo.com. And Sam would be able to help answer any questions you have related to our partner program. He might also introduce you to James, who is also on our partner team, and they may loop Matt into any calls that we have with some of your customers as it relates to SalesPad for BC. So thank you again for joining us. We hope everyone has a great day. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.